I want you to picture something for me. Pouring rain, a farmer standing beside South Africa's oldest vineyard, planted in 1882, but he's ready to pull it out of the ground? In part 2, we find out exactly why this might be and what it really costs to save an old vine. We also find out why Vineymark believes they're worth fighting for. Welcome back to the Vineymark podcast, and today we are starting part 2 of a series with Cathy van Zyl from the Old Vine Project. Now, in our last episode, we unpacked what makes a vine old. Today, we get into a somewhat more sticky truth. It's the fact that keeping these vines alive is in no way romantic and in every way expensive. Lower yields, higher costs, and accountants who, in Cathy's words, are really just doing their job but couldn't be bothered about the romance. We hear the story of South Africa's oldest known vineyard nearly being pulled out. We get real numbers on what consumers are actually willing to pay for old vine wine, and we find out why the rest of the wine world is only just catching up to what South Africa has been doing for years.
But can you just, for those who may not understand, the actual serious, weighty decisions that farmers have to make? You said to keep vines in the ground, you had to spend, or Nadia and Rosa had to spend a lot of time connecting with farmers. Why has it been historically so difficult to get them to keep these vines in the ground?
The very top line answer is it's because of yield. Vines naturally limit their yield when in extreme conditions, but also as a vine gets older, the yields do come down. You can, through careful farming, as Rosa has proven with many of the old vineyards that she's worked with, most noticeably the one that Andrea and Chris Mullineux make a red wine from just outside of Wellington. When they took over that farm, it was only producing, I think, just over 1 tonne per hectare, and they've now got it up to about 4.5 tonnes per hectare. So it's now in a profitable state. But it does take time, and it touches on, you've got to use people in the vineyards who know the vines over time. And it's a tragedy that not enough respect is paid to our vineyard workers, the people who work alongside the farm managers and alongside the owners, because quite often these people have been working in the vineyards for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and they do know each vine. And if they've been taught to prune well, they also understand what that vine needs. So this is where the investment in people comes through. But it costs money to keep people in the place. And when your yields are coming down, accountants take a long, hard look at the book. And I've seen reports where management consultants are bemoaning the fact that the number of hectares over 15 years of age is increasing too much in Stellenbosch. Soon we're going to be producing less grapes to make less wine. And it's the world of finance talking to the world of quality, the world of inputs, the world of respect for old vines, and the world of being, it's their job. They're supposed to take the emotion out of it. But if we can get them more money for their grapes, maybe we can meet the accountants halfway, and they can show that they also have a heart and let us keep the old vines in the ground.
Although surely there is an overlap there. If I think about cultivars like Malbec and Carignan, which are known to dramatically overcrop if given the opportunity to do so, surely we should see more of those sorts of vineyards growing old, because then it would be cheaper to farm them because they no longer have to do green harvesting to ensure quality. So I feel like there's
definitely on the one hand this, on the one hand that, and then on the other hand, yes.
Isn't that what makes Cinsault, for example, such a powerful story in South Africa? We've got a lot of old vines, or at least I think we do, and it famously overcrops when it's young, but undercrops when it's older. It can sometimes be dilute when it's young, but it becomes concentrated when it's older. It feels like the perfect poster child for a project like the Old Vine Project. So Chenin and Cinsault, couldn't they exist as two kind of head boy, head girl, if you like, of the project? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think Chenin already does exist as the head girl, if you want to put it like that. There's over 2,500 hectares of old vine Chenin, and yes, they're wines made from Chenin make up by far the bulk of our members' wines that are registered with us. In terms of Cinsault, yep, it could possibly be, and it is the most planted red variety in terms of when it comes to old vines. Just 502 hectares planted those, so it's got a lot of work to do to catch up. And yes, there's got to be, in the perfect world, there is a Venn diagram where it overlaps, where it stops cropping so much and starts producing yields that do give it a quality of grape that would make a good old vine. Then there's the age of the vine as well at that, so that's quality, yield, and that, and then there will also be input costs, and there would be some kind of perfect overlap there. Because remember, one of your big costs is always humans, and we do want to keep people on the ground.
When I think it was 2021, I wrote an article for Jancis Robinson about South Africa's oldest vineyard, which is the Gevonden vineyard, which they only know it was planted in 1882 because of a hand journal, not...
Yes, not Sarvis, yeah.
Yeah.
But Sarvis has added it, yes.
Have they?
I think they've added it to their database, yes.
Fantastic. So while I was writing that article about the value of this vine, Andre Morgenthau was sitting in a car while it was pouring with rain with the farm owner, trying to convince him to keep the vineyard in the ground. And he was saying, look, I actually need to pull it up. And at the end of the negotiation, it was decided that he'd keep a portion of the vineyard, but it was reluctant. He wasn't overjoyed at the prospect, even though it was the oldest vineyard in the country. This prestige is there. And I think that little microcosm kind of highlights the precarious nature, but also the beautiful nature of the Old Vine project, right? They are farmers facing very real financial imperatives.
Absolutely.
But there is also very real objective value. And I feel like the problem is, for natural history, you can have a natural history museum. People will pay to go and look at a 6,000-year-old manuscript, and you've got special lighting and everything about it. It's very easy to make it look impressive. And really, the job of making the vines look impressive through liquid, which is in a bottle, which has to have a label. I mean, the distance between the locus of magic and the person who in the end will pay for it is so far. How do you close that gap? I mean, that's your job, right? Talk to me about that.
Watch the space.
Well, I mean,
always wanted to say that on camera. No, seriously, watch the space. We have a new initiative which we're going to be launching, hopefully in a few months' time. And then I loved your words, the locus to the bottle kind of thing. But I was in the vineyard because we do still go and see our members. We're not going to, just because we're focusing on consumer projects, leave our members out of that. Our members are our core, raison d'être kind of thing. And I was in the vineyards with at Bellevue and then at Cinsault earlier this week. And as I was walking through this, I had what I thought was a light bulb moment. And I thought, what if we could create an old vine garden that people could come and see? What if we could convince Bellevue to, when visitors come and they can say, you can taste our old vines, but would you like to take a walk through the old vine vineyards, and take people through a walk through the old vine vineyards? What if we could get Cinsault, to do that? Take somebody through their beautiful old Verdelho vineyard or their Pinotage vineyard. And then they would be known as, I had visions of Japanese tourists going through these vineyards going, oh, look at this one, and Instagram opportunity. It would be brilliant. So you're quite right. There's opportunities. So
yes.
It's all about storytelling. I still think that at the end of the day, how we consume our stories has changed. For me, it was always the printed word in books, and I do still read a lot and listen to stories all the time. For other people, it's through soap operas or movies, listening to radios on the stories. People still want stories, and they do love hearing stories of tradition and origin.
But I suppose, to quote Daniel Kahneman in Thinking Fast and Slow, they love stories, but they also respond instinctually to icons and short bits of inspiration and little insignia. And maybe that's partially why you guys developed the Old Vine seal. Can you tell me about that journey?
Yes, actually, that was a brainchild or something thrashed out between Rosa and Andre Morgenthau. And it was an idea to make the date of the vineyard more visible on the bottle. And then, every wine report, every competition that's held has a seal, and they monetize the seal. So there was also a way of funding the Old Vine project, because we didn't want to charge members too much to become members. So it's a way of monetizing it. And it is a world first, so kudos to the Old Vine project and to those two people who played such a great role in developing it. It is possible because we have documented proof through SAWIS, so there is that arm to it as well. And then now that the research has been done on how people take visible cues, and I mean, it's a hell of a complicated marketing research, but they ascribe values to certain visual clues on labels and product dynamics and product features. And they've been able to determine that, yes, people are prepared to pay more for a bottle of wine when it has been in the ground for longer than what other people are saying. And it's for every year that it's been in the ground, it's around R1.52 or R1.25, which comes down for a vine that is 35 years old. It's around 203 Rand extra that they can put on. So just to make it clear, if you would ordinarily be selling your wine for what it tells the marketer is that if you're ordinarily selling that wine and it's only 34 years old, you're selling it for 100 Rand a bottle. Once it puts the Old Vine sticker on, some people are prepared to pay 100 plus 203, so 303 Rand for that bottle of wine. So that's why it's really, really important.
So you said that was a global first, and that shocks me in some sense. Like all of the Old Vine projects we've spoken about have been in the New World, if that is a thing. We spoke about Barossa, we've spoken about the Old Vine project, we've spoken about Vigna in Chile. And yet, the vast majority of old vines exist in the Old World. So why do you think it is what is different about the New World countries that we are waking up to this and the Old World is not, in some senses, taking advantage of what they have naturally, if there is financial value to it?
I think Rosa's contribution here has been vastly underrated because from what I can track back, yes, there have been these pioneers or these champions around the world, but they've never really formalized it or taken as big a bite out of it as we all know Rosa can bite. Because she started the Old Vine journey, her personal Old Vine journey, 2002, after traveling through the Old World and seeing all of these Old Vine vineyards. And she started thinking about what could be achieved to keep South Africa's vines in the ground. I mean, Jancis at around that time, I think, also started publishing a list of old vines on her website, but that is only now being formulated. It was only, I think, in 2019 that the Old Vine Register and the Old Vine Conference was started in the UK by Sarah Abbott. And that's doing tremendous work because they're helping all these relatively small and underfunded old vine associations around the world. It's giving them a greater platform and to speak, to share their stories and to contribute to the greater world of wine. It's giving them that global platform to do it. I think that perhaps, so it was started in South Africa with Rosa, if you want to say about that, but I think that the reason why the Old World hasn't paid particular attention to this was because they didn't see the opportunity, or maybe they were too bound by their own legislation. As we know that a lot of the Old World is heavily based on origin, wine of origin, and what grapes can be grown there and what yields they can give, maximum yields they can yield, and when you can water, and how you're supposed to age them in the respect of Rioja and most of Spain, for example. So I think that they've always just been focused so much on this AOC and AP legislation that focuses on region, that they all have some allowance, in terms of, but it's more a labelling allowance than a labelling term thing than it was a pure terroir or vineyard thing. And now there's plenty of associations, not plenty, maybe 10 in Europe, but who have gotten onto the old vine trip and are starting to communicate that it's coming from old vines.
But it's incredible to think that it took the young kippies of the global wine industry to show the old world the treasures that they have. I think that's remarkable. So what I'm picking up from you is that the South African Old Vine Project is quite revolutionary in a sense. Would you call it a global leader when it comes to making meaningful changes that lead to old vines being less precarious? Does that make sense?
Most definitely. And I think we lead on several fronts. Well, firstly, because of just being out there and being an advocate for old vines, whether they are South African old vines or not. And when Rosa speaks around the world, she speaks about old vines and then draws her analogies to what she's experienced in South Africa and what she's seen elsewhere. Always, of course, acknowledging that the people who come from elsewhere can talk better to the story. But she has been an advocate and just put a lot of work into speaking at old vine conferences around the world. Just as an aside, when the Institute of Masters of Wine celebrated its 60th anniversary, I put Rosa in touch with the organisers of the celebrations that year, and she gave the first old vine presentation in London to the Institute of Masters of Wine that year. So it goes back a long time. So there's that. There's just Rosa being prepared to being a global advocate for old vines. Also because of the SEAL initiative, we showed the rest of the world what you can do by introducing a certified heritage vineyard seal. And then also in being an advocate for old vines around the world by raising this 35-year minimum age with the OIV and working with the OIV to get that across the line. And I mean, there's shout out also to Yvette van der Merwe from SAWIS, who is now the chairperson of the OIV. It was one of the very first meetings, I believe, that she oversaw that at which that resolution was passed. So that's also really great. So yeah, takes a village, takes a kraal to get these things done. In terms of research, though, there's been quite a lot of research that's been done in South Africa in collaboration with people either overseas or locally. So we've got Dr. Johan Berger's research into genomes and the structure of Pinotage, young Pinotage and old vine Pinotage. And in terms of structure, he looked at the acid components, the sugar components, and pH levels. And then he found out that the old vine Pinotage, which was growing in the same block as the young vine Pinotage, believe it or not, because what we were allowed to do was to harvest them separately and keep them separately and make the wines from them separately. That the 53-year-old Pinotage vines reached ripeness levels, reached optimal sugar ripeness and physiological ripeness at higher acid levels, so therefore a better pH than the 7-year-old Pinotage. And because of that better pH, it's a better quality grape when it gets into the cellars, so it means less intervention or less winemaking per se to that thing. And I believe he's doing a similar thing with Chenin at the moment. There was also then research done by the Chenin Blanc Association in conjunction with Stellenbosch University into the aromatic and flavour profiles of old vines. And as a result of that, the Chenin Blanc Association amended their Chenin aroma and flavour wheel to include old vine as a category on that aroma wheel, which is awesome. And that's one way of also talking to sommeliers who are part of our consumer market and speaking to those consumers who are interested when they're distributing those aroma wheels.
Well, the general consensus seems to be mouthfeel, more concentrated, almost chewy.
Layered. Layers.
But then
palate weight, yeah.
But one of the perhaps seemingly less desirable qualities of old vines is that they are aromatically introverted often. And so to the point where at a competition like the Trophy Wine Show, old vines are put into a category of their own. Now, in the one sense, that's beautiful because it's prioritizing and giving visibility to it. But in another sense, they have to be in a category of their own because they don't show up in wine competitions. Have I got that wrong?
It's not strictly speaking correct, because at Trophy Wine Show, we taste all the wines per variety or per wine style. And so within, for example, the Chenin category, you would be tasting young Chenins against old Chenins. So, and you would taste them without knowing. It's only if somebody sticks up the hand and says, "Excuse me, Chair, can you tell me the age of wine number 54?" that we will know that it's an old vine. So I tasted Chardonnay and I tasted Pinotage, not Pinotage, Cabernet this year. And yes, we did have a few old vine cabs that came up, where they do get judged as a category. It's the same as they'll get judged as an old vine, I think, can win the category trophy, but it can also win the old vine trophy.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yes. So you may, for example, have an old vine Chenin that lands up getting a trophy, but its final score was only, say, 96. And you might have a Cabernet old vine that wins a trophy and its score is 97. Ergo, the cab would take the old vine category.
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah.
So we've spoken a lot about the initiatives, the organization. We've spoken about communicating with the consumer, and it's really been about the project and the wines and the consumer. But there is another element to the project that we've hinted at through using words like heritage, but we haven't really delved into. So I want to ask you now about the value of old vines as genetic reserves. What do consumers need to know about how important these vines are? Forget about drinking wine, just as pieces of value for the planet, if that makes sense. I'm not wording it
No,
well.
perfect sense. It is all about legacy and heritage. Firstly, they're importantly from a genetic material point of view, because they have been in the ground in one place. They don't have the luxury of moving from this place to that place if it gets too hot or it gets too cold or whatever. They've been in the ground for one place for 35 years plus, sometimes 55 years. We've got 11 vineyards that are over 100 years old. And they have learned from every single year of being in the ground. They've learned to adapt to the soils in which they're in. They've learned from past vintages, and they are continually learning based on the current climatic conditions that they are facing. So that's very important, because if you're now going to plant a vineyard next door, or you're going to replant, surely you'd want to plant with that genetic material of the 55-year-old vineyard, rather than start off with something new that's come out of a plant nursery. So therein lies the Heritage Vineyards project, which Rosa has started in combination, I think, with Vititech. And so we've taken cuttings from 20 certified heritage vineyards, and we're busy propagating those because they have to go through the seven-year cycle of propagation to make sure that they're completely virus-free. And then soon we'll have stock available for people. But it remains to be seen, do they actually deliver the same quality fruit? That's kind of the unknown. But it is very exciting, and it stands to reason that, why would you not learn from the experience of something? And if learning from the experience means a vine cutting, we've been doing it for many, many years with clonal selection. Oh gosh, we like this one's peppery nature. Let's clonal cut until we get a peppery nature thing. So why can't we do it when it comes to vines that have stood the test of time, that have been grown old. And that also goes back to planting to grow old. Try and use material that is proven that it does well in this environment. And it's also keeping old vines in the ground so that we've got future sources of that kind of plant material.
Is the same thing being done with our mother block Pinotage clones? Because if not, it feels like that's a missed opportunity.
I don't know exactly which blocks they took, but I think they might have taken a Pinotage or two. But the other thing is that we know that temperatures by, say, 2050 are expected to increase by 2.5 centimetres in the Western Cape. We also know that our rainfall potentially could decrease by 25%. So it stands to reason that we plant A, varieties, and B, plant material that is already accustomed to those kind of conditions.
Well, I mean, it's crazy to think the French came in, whenever it was, it must have been almost 10 years ago now, to collect Chenin Blanc clones from the Citrusdal mountains.
That was the other thing I was going to say. That you said, what is it, the role that these vines play in terms of history? And exactly that. The team came from the Loire, and they tasted some of the wines made from the area, and they thought, we don't have these profiles, aroma and flavor profiles in France, and they found out that they were clones that had gone extinct in the Loire, that they weren't planting, they weren't propagating anymore. So they took cuttings back to France, and so now they are using those cuttings to enhance the diversity of what they've got planted in the Loire.
Can I ask you a question about something you said earlier, because it's on the topic of these Citrusdal mountain clones, which, if you don't know that, well, you do, but the Citrusdal mountains is one of the worst places you could hope to grow grapes, at least Vitis vinifera. Just hot, dry, awful. Earlier you said, what does a vine need? It needs 25 to 32 degrees Celsius. It needs roughly 500 mils of rain per year. And you outlined these, and you asked, which regions in South Africa have that? Now, there are a couple of regions that have that, and yet the vast majority of our old vines are, as you said, in Paarl, in the Swartland, in parts of Stellenbosch, in Citrusdal. Those are not nice places. Why do you think, or even up in the Pinotage cliff, why do you think our concentration of old vines seems to exist in places that don't naturally have a very comfy environment for vines? Or have I got that?
You've got it right. I think the one thing that we do have in those areas, maybe one card in our deck, is that they are relatively free from diseases, particularly the fungal diseases and the mildews, etc. Yes, they've had a hard upbringing, and often you can see that they haven't grown very big because they haven't had the natural resources to tap into. But maybe on that front, they haven't had to fight as many pathogens and diseases that other vines have. The Stellenbosch, for example, is maybe the exception there, because it does get, there are parts of Stellenbosch that get very high rainfall, so they do have to spray, etc., etc. But there's also quite a lot of bush vines in Stellenbosch, and I think there the vine spacing is slightly larger, so there's maybe less spread. And then also those, we'd have to look at it, maybe those vineyards get more wind than others do, and the wind does keep humidity at bay, and it does help dry grapes often before the mildews and the idioms can set in.
So I've taken up a lot of your time, but I wanted to perhaps ask one more question before we finish off, and that is that we've spoken about its genetic value, we've spoken about heritage value, we've spoken about all these topics that would tap into a certain audience, a niche audience. But we've also talked about the need to blow this project wide open to the general consumer. So if you think about the next couple of years of the Old Vine project, what do you think are the most exciting developments or steps that you guys are taking in order to connect with that broader market that producers can add momentum to?
Okay, so the one thing that I think, it's something that Andre started, but it's something which I thought was a grand idea and we want to continue it, which is this trade outreach. And in particular, we've asked key members such as Vinimark if they would make note of the old vines that they have in their portfolio, as basic as making an index in the front of the portfolio that says old vines. And then if they will help us speak to the restaurants or the on-trade people that they sell these vines to, and help us over time convince these people to make old vine sections on wine lists. I mean, there are a couple of restaurants that have done that off their own back. There's a couple of, and you know the one in Stellenbosch, the OMARC has got the old vine stand there as you go into the bar. So that's one thing that we are going to be working with, but it does take time. It does take time. So that's a couple of things we're doing, and I'd love to see that. I don't know if we'll ever get that done at the Spur, but you know, if we have it in fine dining restaurants and then in good restaurants, but also through retailers. Wouldn't it be great if we could convince the big wine retailers to have old vine shelves? Where people can see it, and we can do activations in these retailers and then of course backed up by training, so that we can tell the people on the ground what is the Old Vine Project means and why they should do that. So that's one of the things that we're looking at doing. And then there's the other watch this space one.
Okay, so can't even give us a little hint. Okay, all right. Okay. Well, it's been incredible, and thank you for giving your time. As I say, one of the joys for me is getting to talk to people smarter than me for a living. So
I'm not smart.
Well, you seem to have amassed an awful lot of
I'm old.
I mean, look, as we see with vine, sometimes that's enough. You know? It's the fact that you're still here means you must have done something right. But yeah, thank you again, Cathy, and we wish you the best with the project. And Vineymark is firmly in your corner, and we look forward to adding momentum and value to the projects as they unfold.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been fun.
Pleasure.
So from a teenager sneaking past her friends to standing in the rain fighting to save a 140-year-old vineyard, Cathy van Zyl's story is really the story of the Old Vine Project itself. Stubborn, patient, but always worth it. And at Vineymark, we're really proud to be part of pushing that momentum forward. So if this got you thinking differently about the wine in your glass, then follow along with the rest of the Vineymark podcast for more conversations just like this one. Go and find yourself an Old Vine bottle tonight, crack it open, and give us your thoughts.